Hello, this is Whitney Well from Star Hearth Astrology. And today I'm going to talk about the Libra new moon that happens on Wednesday, October 6th. This is a tricky moon, and we're kind of in a group of tricky lunations. So, new moons and full moons that maybe have a few things hidden up their sleeves or are complicated. And so we've got a few ahead of us, and then we head into eclipse season. So we're kind of on a bumpy ride with the astrology for the next few months, really through the end of the year. And so, right, what do we do with this information, right? It's easy to be filled with anxiety, to wonder about how we're going to navigate these challenges. But knowing about this is not, it's not so that we can live in fear. It's so that we kind of know the territory ahead in such a way that we can make choices and not be so embedded in our experience that we think that we are being forced into situations, or we think that we don't have any kind of agency in them. So this new moon, I'm going to pull up the chart in a minute and we're going to look at it and kind of parse it out. But I want to speak to the deeper themes and what I've been sitting with as I contemplate the dynamics. And I think there's a quality in this moon of a kind of fighting by not fighting, a kind of knowing when to lay down your weapons, knowing when diplomacy is going to get you farther than any kind of big show of force or taking decisive action. It's really a new moon that is about the art of compromise. Right? And there's a couple different ways of compromise, right? There's a way of compromising that feels like sacrifice, that feels like defeat, that feels like, okay, I'm just going to negate myself for the sake of peace in my relationships. I'm just going to appease the other, and I'm going to call it compromise. But what it feels like is a sense of sacrifice and a sense of negation. And I think that if that is the only way that we're approaching the compromises that might be necessary in the first couple weeks that follow this new moon, that will ultimately feel very unfulfilling, and that will breed resentment. We've got Chiron in Aries opposing this new moon. And Chiron is really looking to heal this sense of our identity and what's best for us and our kind of mission-driven way that we might navigate those impulses. And so if we're negating that, if we're taking away all of our power, if we're saying, okay, well, I will participate in this, I'll go through the motions, but I won't really be present because I've compromised myself away. I've abandoned myself and what I need just for the sake of peace. Then we don't get what we want, and the other person doesn't get what they want. Because in Libra, right, the value is in doing it together. And so, how do we navigate compromise and togetherness? Well, it's tricky. It takes a longer amount of time. It can be filled with paradox, but we'll know when we've hit the sweet spot because it will feel fair. Libra is the sign of fairness, the sign of the judge, of adjudicating what is fair. And so, right, when we know we've come to a reasonable compromise, when it feels fair to both parties, right? And that is so tricky, right? And that's why Mars is in its detriment in Libra. Mars is decisive action. Mars is a very individualistic archetype. And so when we put it in the place of Libra, of balance and relationship, it is a little bit uncomfortable. It's hard to use Mars in a Marsy way to kind of free us and set us on our own mission in Libra. Because in Libra, it has to use ideals of the beautiful as kind of weapons, right? But it's not a weapon. I think of, one of the ways to think about Mars is as a blade. And it's very easy to picture a sword or a machete, right? And so Mars in Aries is kind of the boldest, brashest, like sword wielding Mars, all the way down to kind of being refined into the scalpel of the surgeon in Scorpio. In Libra, I kind of see Mars as the X-Acto knife, right? Doing very intricate kind of cut paperwork, creating beauty through removing what is unnecessary, creating harmony, creating the sense of order. And so, right, there's a finesse and there's an exactitude to that tool, which is, requires a level of relaxation, of dropping into ourselves, of caring about not just accomplishing things, but accomplishing them in a beautiful way. And that's really what the next two lunations cover. They are bound together in more ways than one, not just across the polarity of Libra and Aries, of the Libra new moon and the Aries full moon, but also because Mars conjoins the new moon and conjoins the sun in the full moon. So we have Mars and the sun very close together because they move at a very similar rate. And so they're just involved up in each other's business, which means Mars is involved in these lunations. And really in the next 4 lunations, because we have this Libra new moon, which includes Mars right in the mix, this and then the Aries full moon that also has Mars, and Mars will be the ruler of the moon. And then we have a Scorpio new moon, which Mars is also the ruler of. And then we have a Taurus full moon that is the beginning to eclipse season. And that brings us all the way into November. But all of those lunations involve Mars. So it's really a time to reconsider how we take action. Now, simultaneous to this, we have the Mars cycle beginning again. And so the Mars cycle involves Mars's dance with the sun, going through all the major aspects. It takes about 2 years, over 2 years, about 26 months. And so Mars and the sun will conjoin on Thursday, the day after the new moon, and that marks the beginning of a new Mars cycle. And Mars cycles have the feelings of quests. They're really cycles of what we fight for and how do we fight for it. We go out with a mission, and during the retrograde, we discover the limits of our strength, the Mars retrograde, and then we kind of integrate that knowledge, and the Mars cycle renews again. And so that's the point that we're at. We're at the point of renewal. But the point of renewal is also the point of ending. It is the lowest energy. So if you're feeling very low energy, right, part of that is probably the new moon, kind of the energetic low point of the month. But we also have the sun, which is involved with our vitality in Libra, the sign of its fall, and Mars, which is also involved with our physical vitality in Libra, the sign of its detriment. And they are coming together at the very end of the Mars cycle. So we're really in a point of just being very, very low energy. And it's hard because we also have Mars all up in the mix, which is aggravating things. So we've got this sense of aggravation and also this sense of exhaustion. And that can be really uncomfortable to sit with because we just want to do something. We just want to move the energy. And yet there's not even enough energy to move the energy. So we've got the new moon, the end of the Mars cycle, low vitality. We have 4 planets stationing direct. And so while this looks like a turning point that we're going to be able to make progress again, because 4 planets, Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, and Mercury in the next 2 weeks are all going to be stationing direct and moving forward again. The stationing degree, what they actually do when they station is they slow down and they stop. So now we have 4 more reasons that the energy is just moving very, very slowly and we're not able to make progress. And so it's kind of this moment where we're forced to kind of stop in our tracks. It's almost like the moment when you realize that you're lost. And we all know that when you're lost, what you're supposed to do is stop and wait. And so that's kind of where we are. And it feels frustrating. And I think that this new moon is frustrating. And I think that this new moon is more about very small motions, small acts of peace and of compromise, but so small that they are not wounding you to do them, that they are not involving a sacrifice of the self, that they are threading the needle of the balance between what you need and peace in your relationships. It's a tricky road to walk. There's kind of, a walking on eggshells feel. So what we need to remember is that usually the sense of urgency about things is unfounded. Usually we do have more time than we think we have. Thinking that things need to happen right away, that things need to be decided right away, creates conditions of stress in them that lead to panic, that lead to hasty decisions that we regret later. And so this is a good time for naps, for yin yoga, for spending time in meditation, meditating on stillness. If that is a frustrating thing to do, then look back over everything that you have accomplished. For all of the closing out of stories that culminated on the Libra full moon that happened this spring. You can use this time to clear out space and connect with not just what is struggling in relationships, but really dream into the space during the new moon. What would you like to see? You can use fantasy in very creative ways. What can you envision for your relationships? What would a compromise look like where both parties feel like it's fair and they're happy? What does everyone's needs getting met look like? So drop in, use the potency of the dark moon, and let your imagination create what you would like to see rather than your intellect and the nitpicky Mars taking apart what you are seeing. I'll throw up the chart quickly and we can look into it. I've talked about many of the key features of this chart. We've got Mars at 13 degrees right in here with the sun and the moon, opposite Chiron, which can bring some more tenderness to this lunation. One other thing that I think is important is we have Pluto stationing direct at the same time as this new moon. And so that just lends a fair bit more gravitas to the whole thing. Things feel weighty, things feel high stakes. And that might be true, or it might just be the depth of the turning point in this season. We've got a few packed weeks ahead. I will be back to talk about the Aries full moon in a couple weeks. So move slowly, peacefully, and I'll see you in a bit.